We are recording. So more so what I will be doing than anything is just kind of reading certain aspects or abstract, elements of the essay and kind of engaging it that way. So she starts off for me, right? She says, her mom, you know, back home, we don't use or we don't have he or she. Igbo pronouns are gender neutral. This he, she thing holds no meaning where we come from. So that being Nigeria, right? So this idea of he or she, these pronouns that we're so accustomed to in the West have no validity in pre-colonial Igbo culture. And then the author responds later on, right? I discovered a pre-colonial society where strict sexual dualism did exist in a form. However, this was weakened by the flexible gender system of traditional Igbo culture and language. As Ifa explained, a major component of this gender framework was that male roles were open to certain categories of women through such practices as Nahame, male daughters, or Igba Ohu, female husbands. She laid out how this allows certain women to occupy roles and positions usually monopolized by men and thereby exercise considerable power and authority over both men and women, right? So there were provisions set within the society that would allow women to occupy roles that were traditionally understood to be men roles, right? And I would argue that it may not even be the case that they were understood to be male roles because the idea of male and female gender roles were not even existing prior to European contact, right? I'm gonna read a little bit further back. So let me see here. One of the specific duties was to see that rules to safeguard or protect women against physical abuse were obeyed. For example, the ban on sexual intercourse with a nursing mother and the 2-year spacing of children, explained Ifi. But all of this began to be eroded when the arrival of the British in Nigeria in the late 1800s. The idea of women as market sellers, political leaders, and successful entrepreneurs in those days was incredibly foreign to the colonizers. With their arrival, they brought a rigid, binary, and patriarchal concept of gender, which were deeply embedded into the fabric of the colonial empire. Now, one thing I want to kind of point out with this passage, right? Women as market sellers. This has great power in Nigerian culture, the role of women market sellers. Has anyone heard of the artist Fela Kuti? It's an Afrobeat artist, kind of popular in the 70s, Fela Kuti. So Fela Kuti, so if you're familiar with artists like Burna Boy, like Wizkid, like Davido, these are what are called Afrobeat artists, right? Fela Kuti is the father of Afrobeat. He's a brother out of Nigeria. In fact, we have an Igbo class offered through Pan-African Studies, and the professor is Baba Anochi. Baba Anochi, for a point in time, was a drummer in Fela's band. But why I bring up Fela is because of his mother, right? His mother was one of these West African Nigerian Igbo market women. And because of her role and her status within the market, she waged a war and a fight against British colonialism through the taxation of the market, right? So the British came in and they said that we're going to tax these market women, these fees that they could not afford. So Fela's mom organized the market women to kind of combat these unjust taxes, right? So I bring this up to show you that these market women had great and vast power in the Igbo society, right? So what they're saying is when the British came in, they tried to erode the power of these market women. So she's talking about, kind of moving further down, she's talking about how she learned that Igbo women also held protests of colonial and patriarchal during this period, although their actions is conveniently left out of anti-colonial resistance histories. Ifi Adamumene wrote about how rioting by Igbo women from 1928 to 1930 eventually led to the collapse of the warrant chief system of local government. There was also the Nawa Bala, the dancing women of movements of 1925, which demanded the rejection of Christianity and a return to traditional customs, right? So these dancing women were advocating for the return of traditional spiritual customs and the rejection of Western Christianity. And okay, and then it says that before colonialism, there was no such thing as a housewife. Women worked incredibly hard as providers, entrepreneurs, and political actors. While nowhere near perfect, indigenous Igbo tradition gives women more freedom than the rigid Western gender construction. Yet, men in the post-independence era comfortably adopted the Western system, which which placed them far above women. Even sadder, there are Igbo men who continue to accept this as a fundamental cultural belief. Many remain oblivious to the fact that it is actually a major departure from the flexible Igbo gender system. So this, for me, is arguing that although we've done away with colonialism, right, there's still men within the Igbo society who hold on to these fixed gender roles that colonialism brought in. And they hold on to it as if it's their indigenous culture, when in fact it's an interruption of their indigenous culture by outside forces. And finally, she says, in examining sex and gender in Igbo society today, it is evident that colonization was not just an event. Colonization is a structure and unheld wound that remains open to this day in the form of Western gender norms among multiple other manifestations. In examining the structure, we must not forget about the indigenous system, the values and the agencies that came before. There are many lessons to be learned in this rich history of gender and sex in African society, notably the value of considering human beings for their true authentic selves and not the label society ascribes to them. And I think this label is what she's talking about, when she mentions this label, excuse me, are those gender norms that society ascribes to you, right? Seeing you as your full self and not as that gender. So those are my notes as they pertain to the reading. We'll move into our fishbowl. You have 2 per semester. You have one to pass. You could use your journal, or you could use my notes to engage your fishbowl. Is there anyone who wants to volunteer? Adam is, sorry, who was the other person? Nicholas?
Mohammed.
Oh, Mohammed, okay, thank you, sorry about that. Is there one more person who wants to volunteer? If not, I'll just call somebody at random. Okay, Irisami, thank you. And I believe that should be 2 for you, Irisami, also Mohammed as well. Adam, I'm not sure, I have it written down, and I'll let you all know next week where you stand as it pertains to your fish bowls. Okay, so we have Irisami, Mohammed, and Adam. Who would like to start it off?
I'll start.
Okay, thank you, Adam.
I was going to talk about how I found it really interesting how in the reading it talked about how there was no such thing as housewives, and I'm taking another course where it's gender and science.
Okay.
And it relates to each other, as you know, what colonialism brought in the idea of men being over women, and it was kind of flip-floppy because they would say women were, in times of war, women were considered to be brave or fighters, or like they were also considered to be like the leading image during the time. But then after the war, they would go back and say that women were nurturers and didn't deserve to be in places of power. So I thought that it was really interesting how in the Igbo culture they had like the husband, what is it, female husband?
Female husband, mm-hmm.
Yeah, where like the women can they can do the same type of jobs men can, and they can take on the roles of a husband but also be a wife at the same time. Because I saw where they talked about if a brother was gone or something, the sister could marry the wife so it could continue the family name. And it just made me think about how, keeping the family, like men want to have sons to keep their name going on into the next generation. And it's very rare that men take on like the women's last name unless they're like rich or something. So I just thought that part was very interesting to me because I've always thought about, some women have pride in their last name, and when they get married, they don't really want to change it or they just hyphenate it. So I just thought that was really interesting that the men can take on the wife's last name.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Anna. Who's next?
I'll go.
Okay.
As I was reading this, actually, I'll just be straightforward. I feel like colonialism is kind of a structure that's kind of limiting the way we think. It's kind of limiting our thinking into roles. So here in the text, we see that women has power. They can do stuff. They can get into any roles and succeed. But it's only when the British colonialism came and then things were changing. And in a way, I feel like even in history, the role of women has been significant, but actually they were not given that attention. Like the significance they had, it was not put into the limelight so that people would know that what they can do. And this is why probably a lot of history is more focused on men's roles. And yeah, society is more like leveling, and it said in the text that women were also correcting this colonialism thing where males and females had different roles. So yeah, that's about it. That's all my points that I got from here.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Oh, I think, this reading was really interesting. I never thought that something like this existed, like within this society in Nigeria.
Mhm.
But I think it existed in many parts of the other world too. We just don't know. We just don't get like into deep the history of our society and communities. So I just found it interesting that women really can be take a role like as men's. And yeah, it was interesting, like hearing the female husband,
Mhm.
like just yeah, it was very interesting. And yeah, I don't know.
I see your hands. Zoe. One thing I just want to point out before we move to Zoet, I think, Sammy, you're onto something, right? Like, it could be that the way Igbo culture identified with gender roles may be more proliferated in other parts of the world, right? And because you have to think of that, colonialism was a global phenomenon, right? And I would argue that if you look into ancient Aztec culture, ancient Mayan culture, ancient indigenous culture, I'm sure the way that they identified with gender was probably more aligned closer to Igbo culture than how we think about gender now, right? And I even think that throughout the world, colonialism had a vast impact in how women and men relations are played out and performed and viewed.
Yeah, that's what I thought, because I remember my mom used to like do the same job as my dad in the fields, working at the fields. And when we grew up as a children, that's what we do.
Mhm.
We used to do too. So it wasn't like, oh, this only men can do this, only boys can do this. And it was just interesting that, got it now. I just thought like, I don't know. It's just I in my mind, I thought like maybe because we needed to support ourselves, like we have to work in the field, and that's what our parents made us to do it. Those kind of job. But I never thought like it was something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zoet, and then Tanaya.
Okay, I can. I was quickly going to respond to Arasemi before I changed it up a little bit. I do agree with her because I noticed that in my past, like older generations in my family, they did all the father's work, taking care of the kids and stuff. But I just wanted to mention something I kind of learned, like by reading this reading and then thinking about the other ones. There were a few connections that I kind of made. In this reading, the author mentioned how women can take off the man's role, but it wasn't really in her like history books. In the Am I a Man reading, they were saying how like children, I mean, they were like, what is it? Forever boys. You know, without the man's role, the woman was incapable, like, you know, she can't do it. When in reality, she can. And it's not taught in our history books, just like the Mandingo reading, I think I mentioned last time. Like, it's just a loosely used word, and no one really knows the history because it's not taught. So I just think there was like a little bit of a connection between those three.
Yeah. Thank you, Zoe. Tanaya?
What this reading further like solidifies in my mind is that what colonialism does and what colonialism did and continues to do is take what they feel is broken and push their way of being. Yep. And make that normal. Yep. Just like I saw this video the other day and it really threw me off, but I can kind of connect it to today's conversation. It was this TikToker and he was talking about how he said, I trust Black women. It was about the debate of whether or not you're supposed to wash off your chicken before you cook it. Mm. And he said, I trust Black women more than I trust white male scientists about cooking chicken. And someone had responded to him and said, it was a white man. And he said, that's just basic science. I don't know, he had to bring race into it. It's something that you can look up. And he said, when we were your slaves, that's how we prepared the food. But ironically, after we're free to do as we please, now our ways of being are wrong. And you can, it's just so many different aspects of society where you're told like it's a taboo when Black people do it, but once white people start to do it, or not even just Black people, when Asian people do something, it's looked at as weird, it's looked at as strange. But when you look in other parts of the world, the US is what is strange to other parts of the world, because other parts of this world have like a different consensus when it comes to women, when it comes to men, when it comes to the capabilities of women. And as all countries do, the news that we get puts us under this scope that makes us think, well, women here don't get the freedom that, you know, women in America get. But we're not getting the news about the, you know, the generals of different armies in different lands. We're getting news on the restrictions that are being placed on women in this specific region, in this specific town. You know, it's all propaganda, and it's unfortunate, but it all ties back down to colonialism, because I truly, like, in my hearts of hearts, like, even if I'm being completely honest, that's why it's been so hard for me to even, like, there is war going on right now, but there's war going on right now in a lot of places, and we're focusing on Ukraine and Russia. And it's really hard for me to just sit up here and, you know, obviously I have sympathy because those are civilians who didn't start war. But those same civilians still in the midst of war are pushing racist narratives and racism on African people that are also trying to escape war. And I forgot who I had this conversation with the other day, but it was like, how am I supposed to feel sorry for someone who's more than willing to still be racist and they're in the middle of a war? Do you know how much hatred you have to have in your heart? Do you know how like, it's not even something that I can put into words because it's so crazy to me. It's like, you want sympathy from everywhere in the world. If you're in the middle of war, I'm trying to go anywhere. I don't care who's accepting me is where I'm going to go, because it's war. It's war where I live. It's war in my country. And you see other people who are Black trying to escape just like you, and you're pulling them off trains and you're snatching them out of bus seats and you're telling them they have to fight your war while you escape your country. It, you know, just because you live in Ukraine, you're still European. You're still white men and women. You just live in Ukraine. I don't know. That might be controversial, and I don't mean to like offend anyone in the class, but truthfully speaking, it's really hard for me to have like the utmost sympathy for people who still are able to be racist at a time like this.
Yeah, I had a similar conversation yesterday, and my analysis was, you know, you're asking for your humanity to be honored, right? But then you turn around in the same breath and dishonor someone else's humanity. You know, I can't settle that contradiction. But one of the things that you said tonight that kind of got my wheels turning was the role of women in war, right? And then the West's ability to come in and impose their norms on other countries. And it made me think about Algeria. And it made me think about the work of Frantz Fanon. And it made me think about the film Battle of Algiers. And the reason why, right? Algerian women, they wore the veil, and I forget the name of the attire that kind of covered their whole body, right? And where like their only eyes would be the only thing that would be exposed. And the French, so Algeria was a French colony, right? And the French had a movement to try to unveil the Algerian women, right? To liberate them. And the Algerian women very much pushed back against the unveiling, right? There were some who, you know, did go along with the unveiling project, but the vast majority of them did not go along with the unveiling. And then as the tensions picked up between Algeria and the French, and the war kind of picks up, the women were the most instrumental piece to guerrilla warfare for the people of Algeria, because part of their Islamic law were men were not able to touch these women when they're wearing their garbs, right? That it was part of Islamic law, and the French would honor that, right? But what that would allow them to do is transport ammunitions across French borders, because they would keep them under the garb and the veils that they have covered up. So they'll be able to do things like plant bombs, be able to smuggle guns and things like that into enemy territory, right? So to me, the confluence of trying to impose Western norms on indigenous people, right? And then the ability to recognize women as warriors, right? And their ability to be proficient warriors allowed for Algeria to really liberate themselves from French colonialism, right? So when I was listening to you, it really brought this into my mind, not to mention the hundreds of African women warriors who stopped and halted and prevented colonialism from taking over Africa, right? So you're absolutely right in that regard. Okay, I want to transition a little bit. It's aligned to the theme of our conversation of the reading, but I do want to say first and foremost, what you're going to hear, I do not believe personally that the community that this person is a part of is his words are reflective of that whole community, right? Also, as a Pan-Africanist, I'm always looking to see ways of connection opposed to things of division. And when I see things of division, I kind of like to stay away from that. But it's also good to kind of listen and see what is the source of the division, right? And I also argue that what the article is claiming, the role that colonialism did in detouring positive Black men and women relations is at play in what we're about to watch in a minute, okay? So bear with me as I get that pulled up. It's really short, and it's about 2 minutes and we'll discuss it, so bear with me. Also, if you know who this is, that Pan-Africanism that he's talking about is not the same shit that I'm talking about. It's vastly different, but check it out.
What exactly do y'all stand for? What are your goals and objectives? You know what? It seems pretty bold to ask something like that, seeing as how the only thing on most straight Black men's resume is audacity. Y'all are literally the least qualified out of anybody in this country to lead somebody, but y'all always want to be in the front. But you know what? It's a special place in hell for a bitch like you that causes division amongst the entire community of people. Out of every subsection of the Black community, y'all are the least educated and the most incarcerated. Please tell me what qualifies you besides the dick between your legs to lead somebody into anything. Y'all always want people to breathe life into y'all, but at this point, it's just pure necromancy because we have no more life to give. Y'all suck the life out of every fucking thing. I mean, let's call a thing a thing. Y'all want to be white men so fucking bad. Y'all see white men at the heads of their household, and y'all can't even get a household to be the head of. Asking women questions like, what do they bring to the table when you don't even own your table, you rent it. Hell, that's even if you do rent it because it's probably in your mama name. I mean, if we could call the thing a thing, y'all are the common denominator out of every issue that we have in the Black community. Y'all are literally the root cause. Blame Black women for fatherless behavior, but then fail to realize that the father is the person that you're not blaming. Y'all blame men for being gay and say, yo, you grew up without a father. Do you see how you just pointed back to the issue? Y'all blame women for having too many kids as if they made them kids by themselves. You keep pointing back to the issue. Y'all be wanting people to hold y'all down, but at the same time, if they too good at it, then they too independent. Then you want to say, oh yeah, like you don't need me. They kind of don't. Maybe what y'all should start considering is that maybe our community is meant to be matriarchal, but y'all just can't accept it because it doesn't fit into what the white man has told you to believe. You're trying to do everything that the white man does, but you're just trying to do it in Black. It's literally the same shit. I mean, y'all are the most homophobic, the most misogynistic, the most transphobic, the most colorist, the most texturist, like the most xenophobic. And you are the most likely to date outside of your race. Y'all are a walking contradiction and a walking joke, and it's not funny. I always want to talk about breaking generational curses and building generational wealth, but you don't even have life insurance. Anytime you die, we got to do a damn GoFundMe. Y'all can't even die right. Y'all been trying to stick this square peg in a round hole for centuries, and it just doesn't work.
All right. So one for me is very obvious. He's been in pain, he's been hurt, and he's speaking from a place of pain and a place of hurt. But like, let's unpack what y'all heard. So what are your thoughts?
May I respond?
Yeah, please.
Initially, from hearing this video, it feels like this is a direct response. Recently, there have been there've been a few these relationship gurus who've been circulating around TikTok. And I feel like that's what this response is to. I don't think it's, him, a Black man saying, I hate Black men. He's specifically talking to these Black men who are portraying themselves as alpha males and relationship gurus, and then not, being up to standard with what they're requiring. Another thing that I noticed is possibly, within his lifetime, he has also experienced situations where he's dealt with Black men who have done things that he doesn't agree with, done things that he sees as a direct contradiction to what they're telling other people they need to do. And it frustrates him, and it frustrated him to the point where he's like, you know what, I'm just gonna make a video. I have the platform. Maybe if I say something, as harsh as it may be, somebody, will get it together. Somebody will change it. Do I agree with everything he said? No, because I know that there are successful Black men. I know that there are Black men who work really hard for improvement of the community. And I think in his mind, he wants there to be improvement, but this is his way of making someone aware of of things that they can work on. And I feel like it's very important when you notice someone slacking, it's important on how you tell them that you think that they're slacking. It's very important. That message, because you perceive the way that you give the message and the way that I perceive the message, I might miss the whole message because I feel like this man just disrespected me.
So do you think tonight his delivery was effective?
No, not as effective as it could have been, only because all it's going to fuel is the white and black men, no, white men and women who already think a certain way of black men. That's what it's going to fuel. It's going to fuel the black women who are having a hard time finding a way to love black men. They're going to take this as, you know what, that's my sign. And a black man then said it. So if I'm thinking it and other black men are agreeing with me, then what hope do I have? I think it's going to spread more hate and confusion rather than positivity in our community. And he probably should work on his delivery.
Thank you, Tanai. Anyone else?
I have to agree with Tanaya on the delivery. I don't think the delivery was great, just because it seemed like it came from more of an emotional standpoint, not necessarily something just he's addressing. It was more of like his feelings were hurt, so he's getting ready to address these issues, and it came off more emotional, if anything else.
For you, Brandon, like not to put you on blast, but you know, like we share the same positionality, right? As black men. Did you feel attacked?
I did, mainly because of when he addressed like interracial relationships and stuff like that, because my girlfriend is Hispanic. So I did feel attacked to that aspect, but then I can also understand certain points of his argument when he's addressing these things. But I think whenever you address something, personally for me, I like to put an address on it. So if I'm talking directly to you, I'm talking directly to you.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna generalize and put everybody else in this box if I don't have a problem with everybody else. But I do have a problem with how you are coming off as a person, and I'm gonna address it that way. Yeah. So I think it's more of he generalized and threw everybody in this box when not everybody is like that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Absolutely. What else? Who else has some comments on the video?
This is not related to this video.
Okay.
But I want to send you, I'm going to find the video and I'm going to send it to you because I watched a video similar, not similar, but it had some similarities where this girl who was like, she's half black and half white. And she talked about how black people are the ones that are racist, and she was saying like black people rule the US. She was just saying a bunch of stuff that was just a bunch of bull.
Yeah.
And all the white people in the comment was like, yeah. Yeah, she's right. She's on to something. I was just like, what is going on?
And this, to me, is where the interracial relationships can be dubious, right? Because this is what I would gather from what you told me. And I don't know her and I don't know the situations. But chances are who she was raised with wasn't her black side, right? And information that she's receiving is not coming from her black side, right? So although she is half black, her thinking operates in alignment with hegemonic white forces, right? Yeah. So what she's going to do is devalue that other side of her, right? And so for me, this is where, especially when you're talking about black and white interracial relationships, because of the power dynamics, I'm very, very cautious about that dynamic, because oftentimes, right, not only will the parents who are white do that type of work, but then you also have the society at large that will affirm what that half is saying, that will make you ignore your other halves, right? Yeah. To me, this is why that I'm very circumvent when it comes to that, because it produces a lot of thoughts like this. Any other comments on the video? Or
I just want to say, like, I think this issue can be like the effect of the social media, that people now they just share whatever things that damage the society more than it creates more problem, like racial problems that we can continue going on through our generation if we don't stop it. But I think just people have to be careful when they share something on social media. So.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Sam, because like I'm gonna tie that to what Tanaya is saying about like these certain male figures who have this platform. I'm thinking about the Kevin Samuels of the world, right? Like opinions are like assholes, right? Majority of them they're gonna stink, right? And because of the social media, everyone can put their stinking ass opinion for the world, right? regardless of how grounded it is, how thought out it is, how intelligent it is, they're out into the world. And if you're not socially critically conscious enough to say this is a bullshit opinion, you're gonna buy into that, right? So I think you're absolutely right. But for me, where I, and why I play this and how it ties to the reading, right? The critique that he's making of heterosexual Black men is steeped in the views of how white, not white people, but this idea of whiteness views Black men, right? So he's critiquing Black men on all the stereotypes that this dominant society has created about Black men. He's using the same lens to view Black men as the dominant white society has created for him to view white men, right? He's not able to put aside this colonial interpretation of Black maleness, right? And just like colonialism has came through and eroded Igbo culture, right? This colonial thinking has came in and created divisive thoughts and ideologies within the Black community, right? We have heterosexual men arguing with homosexual Black men, right? We have a group of Black folks saying that I'm an American descendant of slaves and I'm not getting along with other folks from the diaspora, right? These are colonial ideas that are creating divisions within our community. So we're not focusing on eliminating colonialism, we're focused on arguing and bickering with one another, right? And so again, for me as a Pan-Africanist, I'm attentive and I'm drawn to the things that could bring us together, but I must also be able to assess and critique those things that are divisive so I can work on having ways and mechanisms to bring us back together as a community, right? And also I must be attentive to our now, to our contemporary, right? Because these are the discourses that are going on in our community around Black maleness, right? Around Black manhood, right? So this is why I brought this up.